Hello, my name is Jane Tingley. I'm an artist, curator, and also assistant professor at York University in Toronto. I'm here today to talk about my work in progress, Foresta Inclusive, which is a research creation infrastructure that I'm designing geared towards finding ways to collaborate and interact with the liveliness of the forest. Central to this project is the exploration of the embedded intelligence inherent in nature, and also to develop technologies that focus attention on the autonomy and agency of the naturalized other. My interest here is challenging colonial notions that the natural world, in particular trees in the forest, are inert and commodities to be exploited. This work starts from a position that's already occupied by many cultural and religious traditions, including Indigenous peoples from across the globe, that recognize trees as possessing other than human intelligence. This project challenges human exceptionalism and attempts to make space for other than human persons to be recognized as valuable. I see Foresta Inclusive to be an infrastructure that supports the development of a number of projects designed to ask the following questions. 1, how can we shift Occidental perspectives regarding nature towards one that is sensitive to the embedded intelligence of the natural world? 2, what kind of meaningful interactions can be designed between human and forest within a gallery setting? 3, what might a mutualistic relationship between human culture technology and the naturalized other look like? And finally, 4, once we begin to recognize the intelligence and the sentience of the ecosystem of the forest, what are the ethical implications arising from that recognition? So to begin with, I'd like to identify the dominant visual and conceptual metaphor that frames this project. Let me introduce you to the protozoa, which is a unicellular eukaryotic microorganism. There are many types, but specifically I'm interested in the protozoa that is sheltered within the stomach of the termite. This relationship between the termite and the protozoa is in fact the world's most ancient symbiotic mutualistic relationship. So a mutualistic relationship is such that the symbiont and the host both benefit from that relationship, unlike a parasitic relationship where the symbiont kills the host in order to live. So in this case, the termite relies on the protozoa that's in its stomach to break down the cellulose from the wood so that it may be able to absorb the nutrients. And in exchange, the termite provides safe shelter for the protozoa to live its life. With Foresta Inclusive, I'm asking the question, how can we shift our current parasitic relationship with nature into one that's mutualistic? It's clear that we need nature for just about every aspect of human life, but what does nature need from us? While this is a huge question, this project's interested in poking around this space and in developing visual probes as a way of thinking about this central question. So as a summary, Foresta Inclusive is a technologically internet-connected indoor and outdoor installation that links the ecosystem of a forest through a sculptural sensor hub to an installation within a gallery. This project proposes to make perceptible to the human senses the slow and subtle life movements of trees and surrounding ecology in order to find ways to create a context for in-gallery human and forest interaction and collaboration. This work is not meant to replace real-life experiences within a forest, but rather to materialize the often invisible life movements of the forest and to use technology as a tool to give voice to nature within a human cultural space. The project has 3 parts, as you can see imaged here in the video. The center section shows the physical connection to the forest. On the left, you can see the Internet of Things platform. And finally, on the right, you can see the in-gallery experience. So the image on the right is just one example of some of the ideas that I've been playing with, but it's really the central part of what my research is at this point, how to make compelling interactive experiences within a gallery space. The sculptural sensor hub was designed to follow the visual format of the protozoa. It will be and has been installed in a forest. It is made from cork and wood, and it contains the sensor hub and the 8 eco-sensors, which include soil temperature, soil humidity, a particulate sensor where I can sense particulates between 0.1 micrometers to 10 micrometers, lux, air humidity, pressure, altitude, wind, volatile organic compounds and CO2, and also rain. These sensors gather and transmit live data every 1 to 10 seconds via an internet connection. This data is then sent to an Internet of Things platform, which can then be harvested and materialized in any location in the world. So here you can see the sensor hub in my backyard. Here it is. You can see the lux sensor, and you can also, there's also a wind sensor here. This is an example of how lively the data transmission is. I've sent the wind and lux every second, so I'm able to get some pretty immediate responses. Of course, there's some latency, but in general, it's pretty good. Also, this video shows you some of the experiments I've been doing in my studio. Right here, I've got a RGB LED strips that I'm controlling with Max MSP, and I'm projecting my video, which is a processing sketch, and I'm just trying to get the lights to be shifting at around the same time, the lights and colors to be shifting around the same time. But this is just one of the many ideas I've been playing with. So I want to talk about some of my projects. The first one, Phytopia, is an exhibition that will have already happened by the time you watch this video. But for me, at this very moment, it's in my future. The exhibition was supposed to be in Bengaluru, India, but due to the pandemic, it moved online as pretty much all of our lives did. I was able to show phase 1 of the project, which is now complete. The next 2 projects I'll speak about and show you, I hope to resolve within the next couple of years. So this project is facilitated by the Environments of Change Partnership Grant from the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council of Canada, led by Dr. Stephen Bednarski and based at the University of Waterloo. The Environments of Change grant revolves around the Hurstmonceux Castle in East Sussex, UK. The grant is deeply interdisciplinary, involving medievalists, climate scientists, archaeologists, game designers, and artists. For this project, on top of imaging live sensor data from a tree in this environment, I will also image historical data that's gathered from a process called dendrochronology, which is a scientific method of gathering climate data from the tree rings through the study of core samples taken from live trees or wooden constructions made from old timber. The collected data can provide historic regional climate information, such as how much rain there was or humidity there was in a given year. This idea is really powerful for me and reinforces the concept that trees are custodians of knowledge and history. And so my hope is to create an interactive installation that allows the body to move through space that reflects both the historic and contemporary realities of this location. The final project I'd like to show you is Untitled Poetry AI. It's a collaborative research creation project with engineer and artist Olga Vechtomova that explores emergent creative and poetic possibilities resulting from human and non-human collaboration. This project is a work in progress and will take the form of an interactive sound and light installation featuring poetry created by an artificial intelligence in collaboration with the ecosystem of a forest. So the artificial intelligence that Olga Vechnomova created was originally designed as a device for exploring linguistic creativity through the development of deep neural networks in the pursuit of natural language generation. For this project, we trained the AI on about 70,000 lines of culturally diverse poetry on the subject of nature, trees, and forests. The AI then generates novel poetic lines in real time. We connected the forest inclusive sensor data to the system to allow the forest to shape and guide the overall feeling of the generated line. So for example, if the wind sensor value is high and the light level is low, the system will generate lines reflecting the themes of storms and darkness. The system is sensitive to the continuous change of each sensor's value and infuses the generated lines with the themes associated with each sensor proportionate to its value. The proposed Untitled installation will be an interactive, immersive environment that will be entirely modulated by the sensor value from the forest. The center of this work will be a large projection that images a 3D environment containing the AI-generated lines floating around. The viewer will be then able to select the preferred lines with a touchless interface and then kind of flick them into the gallery space, where they will be articulated using a text-to-speech API and then spatialized within the gallery. So I'm going to leave it at that right now, and I really look forward to having some discussions with any of you on the subject of this project that I'm working on. I'd also like to take the time to recognize the support of the Environments of Change SSHRC grant in the production of this prototype. It was really helpful. Thank you very much, and I look forward to chatting with you.
Hello everyone, my name is Rasmus Vuori. I have been working with electronic and interactive art for about 30 years now, usually as a team member in a production where my responsibility often has been to actually getting the pieces to work. I have also been teaching new media at the Aalto University School of Arts, Design and Architecture for about 20 years, and currently I'm the vice in charge of education at our school. But this talk today is based on my own artistic research. One of my most significant interests has been the creative aspects of using code as a medium for expression. Hence today's topic, where I'll try to make the case why a conceptual model of serendipity is important for us as artists and creators. To begin with, let's establish the field we're operating in. Computational and generative media has quite a history in itself, with artifacts using algorithms to change, adapt, or modify themselves, or the narrative that they're generating. Long before the current AI boom, we had branching or dynamic stories, systems that improvise on the fly. However, with the increased computational power, these technologies have exploded around us. In this talk, I'm not going to focus on those aspects, other than to say that these systems should not be opaque boxes for us as artists, but rather that the code and the computers are tools and materials for us to use. Automated systems use various mechanisms to calculate whatever outcome they think is the best option to choose. In some cases, it's based on sets of data that have been fed into a machine learning algorithm. In other cases, it can be something that comes out of an explicitly designed system. But what if what we desire is instead a range of options and possibilities, all equally desirable? I prefer to call this variability as serendipity. Let's illustrate this with a case study of a short film, a fictional case study, where a computer chooses every single cut. We'll jump in where two clips have already been shown. First, we've seen a wide shot of a man walking in a field. The second shot is one of a snake crawling on the ground. For those of you familiar with the Kuleshov effect, you already know that our brains will connect these two, and whatever we show next will be continuation in the story of the man and the snake. What option does the algorithm give us? In this particular fictional case, we might get 5 alternative clips. A. The man screams and runs away. B. He kills the snake. C. The snake attacks him. D. The snake escapes. Or E. Just a shot of a vulture in the sky. The algorithm will also give us matching values of how well it thinks each of these alternatives fits the story it's generating. This match is usually written as a percentage or a decimal value between 0 and 1. It's actually the same. Here we can see that option C is the best match with a value of 0.87 or 87%. The big question is, should we always let the machine pick the best option? Or do we want to allow for other, almost as good alternative events to occur? Now let's introduce serendipity for this computer. By using the fitness value of each function, we can calculate the probability range for every one of these alternatives. That way, we still prioritize the best options, but allow for a more natural variation. If we'd make it completely random, each alternative would have a 20% chance here. But now the best option is almost 25, while the worst is only 12. However, this might be still a bit too random for us. What if we'd like the curve to be a bit steeper? When we use computational serendipity, we can also adjust the amount as a parameter. The same options with a 0.9 or the 90% serendipity gives us a more narrow set of options. The best alternatives are now up to over 50% and 30% each. As a director of this short film, I'd be quite happy with these options for a branching narrative. Let's have a more general look at how this works. I'll try to visualize using graphs, not direct math. This is, after all, an artist talk, but also since my math is really ugly and clunky. Consider a case where a fitness function gives us a range of options from A to Z to select from, with a 95% match down to around 20%. A straight best fit selection would always pick only option A, since it has the highest value. The other options would never occur. If we convert this directly to probabilities, using serendipity calculations, we can see that the range is quite even, with the top ones all within a 5 to 6% range and slowly shrinking. In some cases, this might be exactly what we want. It's still based on calculations on suitability or fitness and not a completely random distribution. But if we want to make the curve more aggressive, we can adjust the serendipity value down to 0.9 again, 90% as we did before, and the curve becomes much steeper. Or down to 0.8 and it's even more steep. At 0.5 or 50%, the curve is beginning to disappear and options below the top 3 ones are very, very low. However, it's worth noting that if options A and B would be almost or exactly the same, their probability would also stay very close, even if we'd lower the serendipity value. Here the fitness of options A and B are the same, and C is very close as well. Now, with a low serendipity value, the probability of A and B stays the same. The order is not significant, but the fitness value is. By using this method, it also balances out possible decimal or rounding errors, since the best fit function might discard the results that are almost as good, but would never make it first on the list for some reason. To conclude, in computational media, serendipity is a probability variation for desirable and beneficial events to occur by chance. It's a parameter that we, as artists and designers, should control. Computers are not black boxes. They are tools, and the code is the material we as creators work with. The computational model I've described here is actually not very original nor very complex. My goal is to introduce this term into the design language of computational media, as a term in the context of other nonlinear forms of storytelling, like for example improv. Computational serendipity is just one feature, a tiny detail in the vast universe of algorithms, parameters, and data, but they are there for us to control. We, as creators, must take responsibility of our creations. We design and direct how they will act and improvise. Thank you for your attention.
My name is Anni Garza, and this is the Digital Hybrid. This project arose from previous research on artworks on posthumanism and how we are relating to technology. While we developed this suit with the cyborg concept in mind, it is not a speculative design on what the future might look like, but rather a reflection on how human aspects have changed through technology in the last couple of decades, and to the point that, although our capabilities have been increased in several ways, we continuously pay with our information and identity, becoming the currency of economic and political systems with high manipulative power. Under the context of an individualized, hyper-connected human reality, controlled by commercial interests linked to computational logics, the idea of the digital hybrid starts as a consumable product, a smart wearable that takes advantage of the Internet of the Things, or Internet of the Body, affective computing, haptic feedback, and access to social networks, all managed by an artificial intelligence that integrates biological processes of the artist and environmental data with digital communication and emerging systems, intending to create a symbiotic relationship. Although the final result of coexisting with an artificial entity that has its own cognition and emotional states cannot yet be foreseen, One of the objectives of this artistic experiment is to achieve balance and even interdependence between both parties. This is why we granted the digital being power over certain decisions and the capability to physically express itself. Flexibility and adaptation of both organisms, biological and artificial, will be tested when setting priorities over the hybrid's well-being. The hybrid's artificial functionality is designed in 3 models with different approaches. First one as a service, whose objective is to improve the health and life quality of the user. Second, as an entity that continuously learns and improves the relationship of the hybrid with the physical and social environment. And last, as a generative agent, configuring its own responses in order to communicate with the artist and others. The metabolic module is primarily designed to physically ensure that the hybrid works properly. That is, in the case of the artist, that she sleeps enough, feeds adequately, drinks enough water. For the artificial entity, it regulates that the battery is working well and charged, and it also checks that all the circuits are sending data. This module is mostly made up of a series of sensors and circuits connected to a central brain for processing information in an NVIDIA Jetson TX2 computer. Among the sensors, it has for detecting UV rays, humidity, and environmental temperature, also absolute position, which perceives the inclinations of the body and its location in space with respect of the north. It also has an Intel RealSense depth camera that detects the movement around, if there is people nearby, or even if the artist is among familiar faces. Additionally, we use a Fitbit Ionic to measure the heart rate, the number of steps walked, calories burned, amount of physical activity. By connecting to the Fitbit app, we also keep track of slept hours, amount of water ingested, calories in eaten food. Through other APIs, we also have access to location via GPS. When the metabolic system detects the possibility of failure or schedules a time to carry out any activity, it generates different types of stimuli, whether it is sound, through 2 speakers located on the sides of the backpack, haptic feedback, through small motors located in the spine, or caloric change using peltiers in the legs and back. The battery has its own alarm, anticipating if the equipment should be turned off for charging. The affective module is designed to work as an artificial cognition that interprets all the stimuli received and then affects its emotional state. Once all the data from the sensors and APIs have been received, the information enters a contextualizing program. Depending on other data interpretations through fuzzy logic, decides whether the stimulus received has a positive or negative impact on certain emotions. For example, a registered low temperature can have a positive impact if the artist is on the move, has slept and eaten well, and it is in a known location. But it will be negative if she is sitting, hungry, and outdoors. The positive and negative values of the stimuli are assigned, depending on the context, as food for different emotions. A map with independent agents controls the humor of the virtual entity. In this map, basic emotions like joy, trust, fear, surprise, sadness, disgust, anger, and anticipation locate and move towards food. If they reach one with a positive value from the stimulus, they grow. If it is negative, they shrink. As emotions grow, they acquire the capability to reproduce with other agents, giving birth to complex emotions such as love, aggressiveness, or disapproval. Child emotions can feed on the same food as their parents, but if they decrease too much, they disappear. When emotions reach a larger size, they will send an output through the expressive module, and then return to their initial size. As the system evolves, certain emotions tend to be more repetitive or expressive, depicting the character of the entity. On the other side, by perceiving and trying to interpret the state of the entity, the artist tries to respond to its needs, with the intent of having a communication based on mutual training through stimuli and feedback. Last module, Expressive One, is still in development but already designed so that the digital entity can not only express itself through external stimuli, but as a mechanism for learning through received responses to its expressions. The purpose of giving a temper to the artificial being has to do with the idea that the well-being of a cyborg should not only be on a physical level, but also emotional and psychological. When understanding the environment and the social context of the artist, the entity may provide positive expressions to guarantee that she is comfortable to wear the suit and that will look for other people's likability. But at the same time, it might try to stay switched on longer or fitting more its emotional map by manipulating the artist to follow certain actions. This behavior may result, for instance, in the gamification of daily tasks proposed for the hybrid. A first approach for emotional expression has been to mine Twitter data. By collecting thousands of tweets that contain emojis near our location and interpreting their combinations, we use the words contained in the tweet and compare them with similar ones. Then, through an evolutionary program, the entity can choose to formulate a sentence and post it directly on Twitter. If the response is positive, it has many likes, it keeps its configuration and changes it if not. Another expressive development we are working on relates to sound and the formulation of pseudo-syllables for the entity to express certain emotions. Although the resulting sound will be abstract and not comparable with a known human language, through the artist's feedback the entity will modulate and learn if its emotional expression was correctly understood or not. We think about using reinforcement learning for this process. It should be noted that the suit has a path with numbers and a screen on the left sleeve, for which we designed a numeric code of emotions so that the artist can directly tell the affective module how she feels at certain moments, as well as indicating the system if she is going to remove the suit. Then the computer will save current states. While the suit is active, all the information is recorded every 10 seconds and, if connected to the internet, uploaded to the database. We plan, as a last stage, to provide real-time visualizations of the hybrid's evolution for browser during a 1-month use of it. Through this period, the artist will document all her experiences being the digital hybrid in social networks in order to analyze and bring up some conclusions on experimenting the coexistence with an artificial hyper-connected being.
Good morning, everyone. Bonjour, Montreal. Buenas tardes around the world. My name is Dr. Juliana Espana Keller, and I am the moderator for today's Artist Talk as part of ISEA's 2020 International Online Program, which is being hosted this year from Montreal, Quebec, Canada to the rest of the world. I am a post-humanities researcher and professor in the Studio Arts program at Concordia University here in the heart of downtown Montreal. And I'm delighted to be in the company of these exciting artists whose research creation projects intersect with art, science, technology, and computing. Today, we will be discussing contemporary issues and present practice-based approaches to explore the thematic question, why sentience? And why and how does sentience matter? All of these research contributions are interested in sensing and feeling the more than human, beyond and around our strictly human bodies, and allow us to examine close up the ongoing conditions between the vital mattering of the human and non-human. Their work is expanding into post-human ecologies and creating symbiotic and expanded ecosystems through modalities of corporeal and environmental entanglements with other matter and the sentience of our algorithmic sense and sensibility, or should I dare say, entanglement with serendipity. All of these artists are researching and reimagining what the world is in its becoming, to re-examine what it means to be sentient and the ability to feel or perceive in our ongoing present historical conditions that demand a response if we continue to live in the coming post-pandemic world. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our guest speakers today. Our first guest speaker is Jane Tingley. Jane is an associate professor, artist, and curator at York University in Toronto, Canada. Good morning, Jane. And in her research creation project titled Forest Inclusive, this technologically connected indoor and outdoor art installation links the ecosystem of a forest through a solar-powered sensor hub to an art installation within a gallery space. Jane focuses our attention and agency on the naturalized other and the embedded intelligence inherent in nature. She creates in-gallery interactive experiences and makes perceptible to the human senses the slow and subtle movements of trees and the surrounding ecology. Jane is challenging colonial notions around the exploitation of trees as commodities, reminding us of the importance of knowledge embedded in indigenous traditions and proving that trees possess other than human intelligence. Jane is also challenging notions of human exceptionalism and how the non-human must be acknowledged materially as having value and inclusivity as we understand vital matter of the forest with a human cultural space. Our second guest is Anni Garza. Good morning, buenos dias, Anni.
Buenos días.
Anni is a Mexican-German artist who lives and works mostly in Mexico City. Her artwork focuses on the complexity of human-computer interactions and investigating the social, affective, and political relationships built through technology that are relational to the post-human body. Digital Hybrid is a work in progress that incorporates sensors, the Internet of Things, social networks, AI agents, and post-humanist theory to create a bodysuit that increases the artist's capabilities with artificial cognition, affect, and machine expressions. Anni is investigating how to improve the life health of the user through a metabolic system in order to create a hybrid cyborg relationship with the social environment. As a self-regulating human machine, Anni makes use of sensors, artificial intelligence, and feedback control systems through haptic feedback, environmental data, and AI knowledge. Anni is attempting to create a symbiotic relationship with the artist and with others, and Anni gives us a stimulating perspective on the corporeal and ecological entanglements between machines and the environment in the sentient world. She also raises many questions around the new norm or post-pandemic conditions we are now already experiencing in relation to the human and the more than human hybrid. And to our last presenter, Rasmus Vuori is a Finnish electronic and interactive artist in media arts. Hello, Rasmus, welcome.
Hello, thank you.
He is a professor and vice dean at Aalto University School of Arts, Design and Architecture in Espoo, Finland. He is interested in designing behavior and interaction, combining conceptual thinking with low-level practical implementation in art installations, operas, theatre performances, etc., while experimenting with generative storytelling, interaction, and experience design. His research project, Computational Serendipity in Generative Arts, uses code as a medium of expression and as a method to generate and introduce desirable variability in generative art and storytelling without sacrificing authorship. Rasmus proposes that serendipity is a notion that is important for artists to contemplate using codes and computing in an automated system or set of data in an algorithmic apparatus or pre-designed system. He is interested in exploring the design behavior, context awareness, and dynamic personalities for adaptive, interactive, and participatory systems and actors. He proposes that serendipity uses the probability variation for a desirable or beneficial event to occur by chance, and that machine learning and AI are not neutral materials that can be used as design tools and improvisation. Rasmus proposes when the technological complexity and computational potential of autonomous systems increase exponentially, the role of interaction designers evolves from designing simple reactive interfaces to directing individual improvising actors that adapt, adjust, and fit into our world. The technology in itself is neutral, but the algorithms are not. And he also asks us to rethink our roles critically as designers to make judgments in how we teach and direct these autonomous agents to act and react. Thank you. So let's get started. And my first question is to you, Jane. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the sculptural hub and how it was designed, and how did you create the interactive experience in a gallery space? And perhaps how do we shift our human intelligence to that of the natural world? And what does human technology or the nature-culture binary look like to you in this research?
It's a big question.
I know, it's a lot.
I didn't write it down. So the hub itself, as I mentioned, was designed, well, I mean, I was following the looking at the protozoa. So I was looking at different types of mutualistic symbiotic relationships. And so the hub, the form of the hub sort of evolved out of that. It's made out of cork and wood. So I had laser cut all the pieces, and then I put it together and then carved it. I'm also looking at symbiosis in general and mutualism as a sort of an ideal possibility, something that I think that we should be working towards. How do we live on the planet in a sustainable way? So using the mutualism, I've been researching different types of mutualistic relationships, and another one that I found that I find really fascinating is the mycelia that lives underground and connects the roots of trees. And so mycelia, as we know it, would be mushrooms that we see in the forest floor, but they're all connected by a larger body in a subterranean level, and they connect all these trees, and the trees communicate to each other, use and share nutrients using mycelia, and the mycelia also gets nutrients for its own sustenance. And so that's another perfect example. So I've been also working with growing or collaborating with mycelia. And so I took a cast of my sensor hub out of plaster and rubber, and on the inside I laid in inoculated hemp so that I could actually grow my own mycelia form. And so I've been doing that as well. So that's how I've been handling the sensor hub. And it's not perfect, but I'm working towards doing that in the future. Maybe hopefully be able to have everything completely made out of mutualistic relationships. I can't remember the other questions. Could you repeat them?
Well, I wanted to know perhaps how we shift our human intelligence to that of the natural world.
Right. It's kind of the question of like, what is what is a dialogue, and what does that dialogue look like? And for humans, we think of dialogues being something that happens linguistically. But if you look to nature, you see that dialogues happen through action. So flowers and bees are in dialogue as they both sort of interact and sort of perform their actions in the world, but they come into contact with each other, and they perform and they give to the other while taking off and serving themselves. And so I feel as though we should be working towards establishing a dialogue with the natural world, which means that we should be protecting it, taking care of it because it's taking care of us. And so shifting from a language-based form of communication into more of an embodied way of being in the world and dialoguing could be one way of doing that. That language-based communication, I think, it's complicated. And I think that sort of focusing on other ways of being in the world, that the human way of being in the world isn't the only way of being in the world, and actually taking time to see other phenomenon as intelligent and as a thing in and of itself that's performing an action and being in the world, and it doesn't have to be a human way. So shifting the human exceptionalist way of looking at things in order to recognize difference and to sort of learn from it and to listen to it. I think listening is a huge part of it.
That's a wonderful response. Thank you, Jane. And I know that you draw also a lot from Indigenous traditions in Canada too, that helps also acknowledge the knowledge that we sometimes seem to forget about nature because of human exceptionalism and the binaries that we are always blocked by in terms of thinking wider. And I think Indigenous knowledge has a lot to offer in that sense.
Yeah, well, I think that, the colonial sort of approach, steeped in the sort of Western modern industrial modernity, has really shut down a lot of voices, and it's based on social injustices and inequalities of women, people of color, Indigenous people, and nature. And I think what we need to learn how to do is start listening to all the voices that have been silenced for quite some time, including nature, including Indigenous voices. There's so many cultures out there who have really wonderful relationships with nature, who actually recognize the liveliness, the intelligence, the other than humanness that's intelligent embedded within nature. So we need to start listening to those voices in order to shift what's sort of dominating the world. Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much. I actually had a third question for you, but you've kind of answered it because I wanted to ask about the ethical implications, and what does nature need from us? And I think your response sort of answered that in some way.
Yeah, well, I think the ethical part, that's a really interesting question. And I don't have actually an answer for it. It's something that I think we need to start asking. What are the ethical implications once we start recognizing that the forest is alive? All of a sudden, what is our responsibility and how do we need to start to shift? And I think the ethics is the key. If we can understand something, if we can shift how our brains are thinking about it, then all of a sudden we can't ignore how unethically we're dealing with the world.
Great. Thank you very much. My next question is to Annie. Annie, in reference to the title of the work, Digital Hybrid, from a post-humanist or feminist cyborg context, how does the work relate to technology in the sense, how does the work converge or contextualize the data with the social political environment around us?
Well, of course, the idea of building yourself as a cyborg and defining or redefining yourself gives you the opportunity to take yourself or your identity out of the context, which it's very important, for instance, for me in Mexico, because it is uncommon for women to work so much with technology, but now a lot of young women are doing it. So it also stands as a political way of saying, I can manage my own data and design the way all this information is used by myself. So it's an appropriation of these services that we are constantly having and that are manipulating us somehow. So this is a stand for, and the aim is to have my own manipulation and try to find this I don't know, balance with technology, because I think it is not a balance right now. All this information and technological displays are always, on most of times, not focused on giving equality to people, but instead to manipulate us to certain ideas that more and more are becoming obsolete or should become obsolete. But then people are taking them back, like I don't know, misogynistic stance or racism, or every time, or every kind of problem that was supposed to be overcome by technology is now weirdly by media coming back. So this is a way of taking that technology and by appropriation, designing again what the relationship should be.
Great, thank you very much. And to Rasmus, I had to watch your presentation a few times. I'll be honest with you. I'm not an expert in this field, but I hope you understand my question. I hope it's not too far off the field. How does serendipity work in your proposition, in the sense that is the serendipity calculation and the fitness function working together, or are these separate analysis for comparison purposes, or just speculative pragmatics?
They're definitely working together. I think that was an excellent question. Thank you, Juliana.
Oh, great.
It's I think I need to backtrack a bit into the context where I'm coming from as well, because best fit functions have been available for a long time. You go through a lot of data and you search something that's supposed to fit and make a decision based on that. And I just realized quite quickly when we started working with these kind of systems that we ended up with really bad results from a creative perspective, and the choices were super bad. And then when the AI boom came a few years ago, when we started to have more of these autonomous agents doing things, for example, we had the Twitter bot, the AI communicating with people online, and it turned out to be a racist. And I saw a lot of these effects that are coming from this belief that our systems are objective and transparent, and I realized that a lot of this is based on quite a naive belief that just doing something computationally is objective, and when the reality is that the data behind it is flawed and incomplete. And then I decided to add this incompleteness and randomization on top of it, and that's where the serendipity idea then came. And then I realized that wait a minute, that this is how serendipity works as well. When we're going into a particular place or event or whatever, and there are some random factors involved and there's some noise involved, but in reality things are incomplete. Both the past and the future is incomplete and imperfect. So then I added this as a layer of noise into the function that makes the decision. And then the amount of noise is basically then the way then you sort of choose in the design how much serendipity there is. And there's an amount of serendipity in a system that uses it is can be also a variable. It can be defined by different parameters as well, because that's also something in reality. We have a certain amount of chance in some situations, and in others we have more options of where to go, and it really depends on the context as well, and it can change very quickly in a situation. So the computational model can also have an effect on the amount of serendipity. Did this answer your question?
Yes, it did, actually. Thank you. And I'm glad you gave us that background information, because it was important to add to us understanding what is happening within your thesis. So I do have a couple of questions already, and so I'm gonna while I'm checking here, let's see. I'm going to go with a question from Steve Daniel for Jane, who is asking, he says that he finds the gallery environment interface very interesting, and he would love you to tell us a little more, love to discuss it a little bit more.
So I guess specifically, I'm not certain. Find the gallery environment. Well, the gallery portion is coming in a number of different projects. So I have 3 different projects. This is sort of what the work in progress is all about. I'm really, like, I've got the hub working, and so now I'm just trying to figure out what I want that gallery experience to be like. So with the Hearst Monceau and even with the Poetry AI, what I would like is, I'm thinking about a number of color relationships that are constantly shifting in relation to different phenomenon that's happening in the forest. So I want every aspect of the gallery to be modulated by some part of the forest. And right now I'm kind of stuck trying to figure out exactly what that means. And I'm working with the easiest, like the lowest hanging fruit, which is RGB LED strips and projections. One thing I am starting with some engineering students is that we're using the forest information to create an incubator for plants, so that the forest can sort of cultivate saplings that can get transplanted into their own forest. So if it's a boreal forest, that we'll be looking for trees that are indigenous to boreal forests. And so we can use the forest data to control humidity levels and temperature and light and all that sort of stuff. So it depends on what the project is. But it's, yeah, I'm really interested in how I can use VOCs. That's the thing I'm most interested in trying to figure out.
Okay, thank you. I would like to ask Annie, actually, where do you think your research now is, how it's going to be taking you forward? You did mention a little bit at the end about it, but if you could just elaborate a little bit more about where the digital hybrid, is this going to be a multiple or eventually?
Well, I believe this is going to be a one-time suit that I wouldn't like to wear for more than maybe 1 month or 2 months, because also it is, I find it a little bit invasive for the body. Even wearing the Fitbit has been a little bit shocking, because it regulates and sends alarms even when my period it is going to be, or whether I slept well or not, or it constantly gives me feedback about if I should stand or move or drink water. I feel a little bit controlled already by it. But I think the most interesting part of the hybrid is precisely the way it can express itself. That's something I'm looking forward very much to observe. I'm not sure what the result is going to be, but it is not a language. We decided it wouldn't be a language per se, the way it will communicate, not any human language, but a language of its own, like sounds or syllables that it will conform itself to express certain emotions that it has. So I think in this way, it will be interesting to understand whether if this kind of intelligence, but it's more serendipity, as precisely as Rasmus says, the data is not complete. It's just a construction over incomplete information, and then the result will be emergent and generative in a way. So I don't know if we can actually observe this as a way of creation or artificial creation, and how can we really relate to that in an aesthetic way, but also in a corporal way, because it will be not only the sound, but the vibrations and the movements and the notifications. It will be, I think, something that we already are living with our cell phones, but in a more bodily way. So I'm still looking forward. I'm not sure what to say about it, because I can explain you how it is conformed, but now how it feels to interact with it, to receive responses, for instance, from Twitter, that actually other people are all the time sending with these emoji things, and interpreting that as what will it be when it takes all that information and conforms its own messages. So I think the most interesting part of this expressive module will be precisely to observe if we can have some sort of real communication with it, or if it will be very, very abstract to the point that it wouldn't be possible to communicate, and then it will become something that I would like to get rid of instead of becoming a part of it. So I think the main challenge is to make not myself flexible, but the system. Can the system be flexible enough to give generative information that will adapt to some sort of communication with human? And I think that's the base of the experiment.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Annie. Rasmus, maybe you would like to comment on that. That I see a thread there between your project and Annie's response, and also if you could expand on where you think these experiments are going in your own practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks. I especially like the when Anni, you said you used the word intelligence in quotes, like intelligence, and I think that's an area where there are many many perspectives that we share, that we kind of walk around and we have a hard time to grasp what we actually mean by that, and also now I have a hard time to figure out how to put this in a short way. When we design these systems that have this, they are reactive. We have plenty of data, and they are reactive systems. It's really easy to say that they're intelligent, but in reality, they're not. They're just very dumb and very straightforward. And then to make them truly intelligent or sentient and alive, or whatever terms you want to use for this, there's something else that we expect to see in them, so that we don't create an emotional bond with anything that we build unless there is something that triggers that bond, and it's definitely not the mechanical behavior of them, but rather that there is some kind of some anticipation, there's some kind of imagination, some kind of fuzziness in the data. I need to we're talking about the fuzzy data in the project as well. And the forest, I think, example, by the way, includes a lot of that collaboration between the trees and the mushrooms, and the communication between them, and how it becomes an entity of many entities. One tree is not a forest, but many trees makes a forest, and the forest together are one entity that reacts in a completely different way. And it's this network of agents that we then perceive as alive. Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a clear, definite answer to this question, but I think what is intelligent is one of the most difficult questions that we face.
Yeah. Thank you very much, actually, for that last response, because it connects very, very well with the next question with Jane. I have a question from Bonnie Mitchell, who asks whether your project has been influenced by the research of Suzanne Simard, who actually explored the communication between trees and other elements in their environment.
I'm just looking at her. She's at University of British Columbia. I've done a lot of research on trees and how they communicate. I think Suzanne Simard did this one experiment where she was trying to see if trees were interconnected through the mycelia. And she put bags over trees, and then she pumped them full of isotopes, I think, and then she was actually able to find in other trees, she was able to find those same isotopes. I think that's how she did it. So yes, definitely. I've been reading a lot about tree communication, tree intelligence. They have so many sensory receptors. It's extraordinary. Like, they've got 15 more than we do. They can see certain colors. It's really extraordinary. They're aware of self to a certain degree, and this discussion of what is intelligent, I think, is a really interesting, complicated question. I mean, if it's about problem solving, then trees are definitely winners there. So I mean, there's a lot of really interesting work that's being done about trees and about other minds in general and just different ways of knowing.
Great, thank you. Would anybody else like to add to that last response?
Well, maybe it will extend very much or take our conversation to somewhere else, but I do believe it's interesting to not to try to find out what intelligence is, because as Rasmus said, it is very difficult. It is not really defined. We have defined maybe some characteristics of it, but when you are designing systems that you want to be emergent or creative or whatever, it is really complex to analyze what intelligence is. You cannot say, I don't believe my system, although it has a lot of complex modules that have different techniques of AI connected between them to achieve very specific tasks on part of the process of creating this entity. I do believe it is not intelligent, even if it can reproduce or create its own language. I do not think we can have systems as intelligent. We can have them as complex, and complex systems always come out with some emergent behavior that we can identify as intelligent somehow. This happens also in nature and so, but when you analyze the small parts that compose that, you definitely think that it's not intelligence, at least, not even at least as my cat has it. I think probably my cat is more intelligent than my digital hybrid. But the emergence of these behaviors and the design of these small components or agents, it's what makes these emergent behaviors interesting, and maybe why it was called at first intelligence, artificial intelligence. But maybe the artificial cognition is more attainable at least in the stimuli part, because we have a lot of sensors, we have a lot of APIs, we have a lot of communication that not even as natural humans we have. So I think this is the interesting part of analyzing these subjects, the cognition of and processing of information that machines have. At least I think this is a very important part of all the projects we are commenting here.
Wonderful, thank you for that. I think I find that really interesting to discuss how the generative outcome, perhaps as Brian Masumi points to, the fact that the processual nature of the event is always imminent. So instead of these binary oppositions, we have other speculative, pragmatic thinking, feeling probabilities that are coming out of each project, which is quite interesting. Okay, Jane, you're getting a lot of questions and comments. I would like to, a comment actually from Steve Daniels, who's saying, I'm glad to hear people are questioning or at least qualifying the idea of intelligence in AI and agent systems. And Bonnie, sorry, no, I have a question above here. Sorry, it was from Krista Somera. Dear Jane, thank you for your nice presentation. Can you please tell us where you see the role of artists within the environmental crisis situation?
Yeah.
Big question.
So I've been thinking a lot about that because this project, for me, so I guess I feel like the environmental crisis has resulted in everything that we've been seeing happening in the world. But it really is interconnected. It is really caused by this very unhealthy and unsustainable relationship with the world that's steeped in sort of capitalism and exploitation and injustice towards people. And part of that is an injustice towards nature. And where that comes from is this attitude that's inside the body that's held in the mind. And I feel that artists are really good at asking questions, especially when you work with interactivity and immersive environments. The body engages with ideas in a different way, in a physical way. And so when the body is sort of asked a question and they can see there's an agency, they can see something that they're engaging with, and they can understand that this is connected to something else, and like in my case connected to a forest, then you can't help but ask questions about how you believe things, and it sort of enters into the body and the mind in maybe more of a roundabout way. I think artists have the ability to sort of ask questions without maybe getting defenses up, because it's the artist can offer scenarios or situations or speculative ideas about different ways of thinking. And at the end of the day, the way we change things, I think, is through the individual. Enough individuals start to feel and think differently, you're going to see changes on a systemic level. So I feel as though the role of the artist is to probe and ask questions, create environments and different scenarios that help people think about things differently, or ask questions that challenge people to question their own belief systems. Maybe I sound too idealistic, but that is my hope.
No, it's quite actually a really interesting affirmative ethic or position that you're taking, and gives us the idea of hope, for the future. And I guess what's interesting perhaps is the way that you design or construct that interface within a gallery environment, and perhaps you take those things into consideration in the way that you propose to create a sort of visual representation of that, because that as a way of sort of preparing this sentient knowledge that you're creating of the trees and communicating that to the audience is also it requires a lot of thinking and putting together, and it's quite interesting how that interfaces with all of the ideas that you bring together. Can you talk a little bit about those, especially the visualization of words and poetics within the work too?
Yeah. Well, these will be in projections. I'm not certain if I understand the question fully, but the AI is going to be creating with the forest general lines of prose, which will be floating within a three-dimensional space that's projected onto the wall. And with a touchless interface, you can select different poems or prose that you find compelling, and then you can flick them into the gallery, and they'll be spatialized using a text-to-speech API. But I think Rasmus, you had something to say. I saw you put your hand.
Oh yeah, I just actually put it in the chat as well. I'm just going to say that I agree 100% about everything about art exposing the questions, and art's role. I think it's right now we are in a situation where art is extremely important to have this critical discussion about things that are going on. And I sort of put it in one sentence: art exposes the question design attempts to solve. Without those questions, we don't really know where we go, and we end up with very naive solutions. And we need to be open about where we are and where we're going.
Thank you. Really, really happy that you could give us some feedback. Anything from you, Annie, to add to that?
Well, I was also thinking that art also gives you not only the freedom to ask the questions, but to mix the knowledge in a very transdisciplinary way. For instance, I was thinking about the project, and it took 5 other people that I invited to collaborate with me that were from AI scientist, hacker and philosopher, and about technology, electronic engineer, fashion designer. So it was really interesting to have this type of team. It is not common in, at least here in Mexico, in some universities, to find this kind of very heterogeneous groups to work with. And I was very interested in hearing what they had to say. When I explained first this idea I had to make a cyborg of myself, a lot changed during the process. A lot of the design, a lot of the intent of the modules changed thanks to these conversations I had with them. So I think it's also very important to understand that art is the field when you can have all these different disciplines making questions and mixing perspectives on how and also to speculate about how the future will be or should be, depending on the things, very specific and technical things we know how to do.
Great, thank you. Yes, please, Jane, go ahead.
Yeah, no, Annie, I really agree with that. It's pretty extraordinary because it's this sort of intersection of art, science, and technology, and all these different ways of thinking and probing and asking questions. And I think half the questions that happen when you're making in an interdisciplinary way are the most fascinating, and they really shift the final thing. So yeah, I just wanted to say I agree.
Great. We don't have any questions in the live discussions, but I do have another comment from Steve Daniels that he says, I am thinking about the idea of bringing the environment into the gallery in real time. This is different than ultra traditional representational media, which bring it in as an artifact. Here it is as an agent or an actor. Would you like to comment on that, Jane?
Yeah, I don't know if anybody else also wants to comment, but I mean, I just think that it's the idea of what is agency, and this is the question I struggle with the most. When I represent certain things in the gallery, am I simply just translating it? I don't know. I just been thinking a lot about what agency actually means in this context. And I don't really have something really intelligent to say about it. I just think it's a question. I was thinking about, that's why I was thinking about the plant incubator, that trees that naturally care for each other anyway could maybe care for a sapling that can be transplanted into a forest. I thought that, that is a form of agency, but I don't really know what agency really means in this context. And I think it's the big question.
Annie, can I ask you the same question? What is your relationship to agency or agential realism today?
Well, of course, I think the artwork is an agency of the environment to myself. But I was also thinking about how this will be presented in a gallery, because when I proposed this project, I thought it as the only person who will really experience all the process and this complex result of technologic display will be just me. So the artwork is basically for me, for my experience. And this completely changes really the traditional representation media. I can only express, and I am not intending to show this in a gallery, but rather to have a very close experience with the rest of the people, explaining every day what is happening. And I think the only way to do that is through social media. So I'm not really thinking about even this agent as an artifact, but as an experience. I think most of my artworks are meant to be experience instead of an object. During the process of building the digital hybrid, I also made another project. It was some sort of suit but this was for the audience. So people at the beginning of the year, this was in a museum, and people could come and wear these suits, and they were all connected to social media, and the social media reactions would make some stimuli for the person who was wearing the suit. For instance, sending small electroshocks to the arm and moving it involuntarily. So people could have a little bit of what the digital hybrid is as an experience, as a short experience for 5 to 10 minutes. They could wear them and move around the gallery and interact with sensors in others' artist artwork, which was very weird as well, and would change the perception of the other artist artwork. So I'm thinking more about the purpose of the art as an experience, in body experience, and psychological, emotional, and cognitive experience, more than the things they can interact with or have as an object in the museum or the gallery.
Thank you. Rasmus, what do you think about this kind of affective behavior? Does it impact on you in your research?
Oh yeah, well, definitely. And I think that the change from artifacts to agents and actors is super relevant. But I would kind of challenge the newness of it. But what's sort of happening is that some of the traditional silos are being broken down, and then some of the traditions from other disciplines, artistic disciplines, are being shifted to new ones. Doing a performance alone in the forest is possible now because you can somehow communicate that, and you don't exactly have an audience at that particular time, but it's still, you can still share it in some way through some new medium. And the same happens in gallery spaces, where we traditionally only had artifacts available, but when they become active agents, then we can borrow from for example, from improv. A lot of the mechanisms are there that has existed in a long time in theater, all of a sudden become relevant in this gallery context. So there's a lot of this cross-pollination, and it's when a multidisciplinary artistic work that becomes possible in a new way.
Thank you very much. So I don't think we have any more questions. Let me just check again to see. No, I don't have any questions or chat. Thank you all for expanding on your research and your practice-based approaches. And I'm hoping that everybody were interested in why and how sentience matters, especially through these such interesting human non-human approaches. And it's actually a lot about more than human and than strictly around our human bodies. It seems the conversation is taking us also a little further in allowing us to examine close up the actual ongoing conditions around the vital mattering of the human and non-human. Are there any last comments that you would like to make before we close up? Or if you have any questions for each other?
Well, maybe I do have a question for Jane. I was also thinking about how these non-human sentience can take us to a different understanding on reality. Because of course, as human beings, we are very limited to what of the reality we can perceive, but we are making these sensors and stuff to better understand how the systems around us work. So what do you think about this widening on our perception of reality, for instance, through understanding how the environment or such environment as the woods work?
Yeah. I actually think learning from sort of the other than human, I think, is going to be how we manage to get ourselves out of the problems that we're finding ourselves in today. I mean, the way natural systems share resources, and I mean, like the dialogues that are inherent in nature, I think, are really important. And I think one of the things that has happened with us is that we are very limited, and we have this idea of our own superiority, I think. And there's no one particular agent in a complex system that's superior. Like, everything is important. All the different bits really matter. And so I think learning a little bit of just sort of looking around and learning from it, and to stop placing humans first. I think that's the key thing that's going to have to happen in order for us to actually move forward and to listen. And I think it's a matter of listening, to be honest. It's about listening to different voices, and that they don't need to speak in a language that I understand. I think that's really problematic, that the brain only understands sort of this one language. I mean, maybe you're a polyglot, but I mean, at the end of the day, we understand specific languages, and we understand our concepts that are framed and housed within that language. And I think learning how to listen to different languages that are nonverbal, I think, is going to be really key to sustainability. I don't know, what do you think?
Thank you.
Anybody? It seems like, Jane, you really made a very powerful statement. And I think we all agree, actually, on everything, and that perhaps each process in its becoming is both political or environmentally political and aesthetic at the same time. And where political is defined as relational or participatory, and the aesthetic as qualitative and creatively self-enjoying. But it's really important to be aware. I think what's really interesting in your project too, Annie, is the fact that you were giving us information about how it felt to actually wear the digital hybrid, and the sort of things that we weren't expecting, things like, about how you were really feeling lugging this thing around, and everything it actually really knows about you. Whereas, Jane, did you?
No, after you finish saying what you're saying, I'd like to speak.
So it's interesting. It kind of is an inverse or an unlearning, actually, of the actual piece itself. That we're always expecting so much with this AI intelligence to teach us things, but actually it's doing the opposite to you as the human. So I would love to hear your response, Jane, please.
Yeah. Well, I just think with Annie's piece, there's two interesting levels. So you're talking about it on an embodied, like, this is how I feel. These are, my rights that I feel that are being infringed on, or this sort of weightiness. But I think like the visualization was really interesting, and also being able to see. I feel like there's watching you go through that and watching your body be mediated, which I think is a really important part, because then we can, like, sort of this, what's the word for it? Sort of interactivity by proxy. Like you're watching somebody else interact, and you're able to place yourself and imagine how you feel, and then all of a sudden start to see the technologies in your life. So I feel as though that has a lot of value as well. And I could see about not having to experience it personally, but to be able to see you experience it, and that's like very real. And I think that could be very interesting as well, as on a gallery side, potentially.
And also, I would say, in a personal matter, that I've been training myself for more than a year with these apps and apps and etc. And what I really realized it was that I was not hearing anymore myself, but only basing my health on data. And this became problematic eventually, because I started to lose too much weight, or not eating enough, or feeling too tired, but I was forcing myself to keep with the program, thinking it was designed perfectly for my body type and whatever. And what I really learned was that to hear to my body again, like, I need more sugar. My body works with a lot of sugar, for instance. So I started to have a major income in carbohydrates, and started to feel better again. Also, I was getting very stressed about achieving everything. So the stress started to make me a little bit sick as well, and worried. And so I think what you said is very important, like going back to hearing more, not only about the environment and non-verbal languages, but about even our own body and how we work, this intuition, and how we are part of the environment, and we are human, and we are organic, and how we have to work in the system and stop creating these social and psychological systems to work within and to fit that it's not really possible to achieve.
Great, thank you for that response from both of you. Rasmus, to close, I guess, if we start understanding from this conversation what's coming out of today's understanding of what is the more than human and in the sentient world today, could you maybe respond to how we're responding to the pragmatics of the algorithmic conditions unfolding? Just to give us a recap from your end of things in the computing world.
How we're responding. Do you want the cynical answer, or because I think Anni made it had a very good point with the data and the numbers.
Yeah,
we have a tendency to trust too much. When we get a number, we think, okay, that number must be right, and we have to follow the numbers. And while in reality, everything is much more complex, and we need to trust. The numbers are good pointers, but we also need to trust ourselves and our intuition, our feelings, etc. And I think that's it's a different game there. And maybe to throwing in another word that's very much a cliche, but when we talk about these intelligent systems and etc., but they're not wise. There's no wisdom in them, and maybe the wisdom is to follow also emotions and allow for the imperfections. That's all I can say there. But I think in our society, there's way too much of this trust in numbers, and I think we have a responsibility to kind of push critical thinking to change that.
great. We just have maybe 2 minutes left. We do have another question that came in from Pablo Sotres Castrejon, who asks, have your artworks evolved in some ways you did not expect? Which have been the most interesting discoveries you made? If you could just give a short answer to that. Start with you, Annie.
Short answer would be yes. Long answer would be it made such radical changes in the way I was connecting with these people I was working with and creating the hybrid and discussing every day, that I think it's mostly like our child. The digital hybrid is a child of all of us. And the outcome, at first I didn't expect that the systems would be so well designed and so in a way that we don't really decide what is happening, but the hybrid has the information to evolve in a very logical and beautiful way, I believe. I think, but this is of course a matter of design and the people who were involved in the design, especially Eddie and Vladimir and Hugo were very, very specific on the ways they were assessing the problems. So I think that's the most surprising outcome for me.
Thank you. Jane, last minute response. Oh, I can't hear you.
Sorry, I guess I muted myself.
It's okay. Technology again.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think they always evolve in some unexpected way. I think that's the nature of the beast. However, I'm in this weird place right now where I find that I don't know what the next step is, and that's usually when the evolution starts to kick in. So I'm expecting some very interesting things to happen when I start trying to work with all of the sensor data that I've been collecting. And yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. Yeah.
Great. Thank you to all for participating in these artist presentations and really deep, enriching conversations today. This event would not be what it is without your presence and essential contributions. And please stay on and join us for the networking break for a more informal conversation. Merci à tous. Au revoir, hasta luego. Be safe, everyone, and hope to see you again somewhere in the world.
Thank you, Juliana.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.